the field vote for the first time in absentee ballots. They vote for Abraham Lincoln. But 45% of white Northern men will not vote for Abraham Lincoln in 1864. That's the same percentage who would not vote for him in 1860. That's worth remembering as we think about self-congratulation. And when you see the Lincoln movie and you see the things these people are saying, that's what they were saying and worse about Abraham Lincoln. And so why would people vote for George McClellan as the candidate in 1864? Because they've lost how many sons are enough? How many fathers and uncles and brothers, right? But also, do we really want this juggernaut of freedom to keep rolling? Is there anything that could slow it down? So we need to remember, too, that in the northern political sphere, that we go into Reconstruction. People sometimes wonder, well, why was Reconstruction so hard? A lot of white Northerners say, I never voted for it in the first place. I think this is a mistake. So you need to understand that landscape. So the red counties helped untie the chains of slavery by re-electing Abraham Lincoln. If he had not been, the course of, certainly, of Reconstruction would have been different in some ways. We can talk about that if you want to, though I'll just tell you right now, I don't know the answer, and neither does anybody else. But in many ways, the story that is most relevant to our purposes today is this one right here. And this is a new project that we've made at Richmond. I don't know if upstairs, can you see the arrow on the side? Well, I can't see them to know. What I'd really like to do is play this as an animation. So what we've done is, those of you who are military historians will know about the official records of the War of the Rebellion. I think I can move this with this interesting device. I can. Okay. So what we've done is we've mapped everywhere the United States Army was every 2 weeks in the war, using the official records of the War of the Rebellion. But we've geocoded them so that they can be mapped. Now, this is just a very large set of names and dates otherwise. But that's what the blue dots are. The red dots are episodes of African Americans interacting with the United States Army. And like I said, this is just let's see if it'll catch up with it. Yeah. So you can see that there's the United States Army massing. That's in July of 1861. This is at the time of Manassas. You can see some of the episodes. And each one of these red dots, you can click on it, and it will tell you the story behind it. And so we'll let it run a little bit longer, then catch up with it. Okay, that's up to April 1862. This is how many times that African Americans are saying, I've heard that the Yankees might be within reach. Then you have to decide, I'm a mother with 2 children. God knows where my husband is. They took him off to work on the fortifications. But I hear the Yankees might be there. Is it worth risking my life of my children, to try to make it to them? Because what could happen? Well, it matters. We don't know what the Yankees are going to be like. Our masters have told us they have horns. They've told us they're going to chop our hands off. They've told us they're going to sell us to Cuba. But could it be worse than what I've been enduring? Is it not worth taking the chance? And each one of these red dots tells what happened when they did that. And sometimes they get there and they're welcomed in with open arms from Union soldiers who are abolitionists or who have grown abolitionists after they've actually come to know African Americans in the field. And they give them work and they take them in. And camps grow up around these Union installations. But you'll also see in this site that there is also rape, there is also rebuff, there is also capture by the Confederates, being taken back into slavery. And you will see historians have recently discovered that maybe as many as 100,000 African Americans died of disease during the Civil War. That when you go to these camps, you can imagine, first of all, you've got 30,000 men in the field in a temporary setting with no earth-moving equipment and all that. And then you have thousands of African Americans, nothing but the shirts on their backs, setting up, trying to get close to freedom, trying to stay out of the clutches of the Confederates. So this is the first sort of comprehensive catalog of all this, and a lot of the dots are from newspaper articles or diary accounts, and it can grow indefinitely. But I just want to kind of give you a sense of what this looks like over time. I think maybe if I click here, it's going to play. Let's see what happens. No? So if I could actually get over to that side, you'll actually be able to watch Sherman's March. And you'll see that wherever the Union Army goes, that the African Americans seize the moment. There you go. See Sherman gathering there near Atlanta and beginning to go down there. And so this has been, the controversy among historians. Was it self-emancipation? Did the slaves free themselves? Well, as we can see, they risked everything that they could to free themselves, but without the presence of the United States Army, there's nothing to free yourself with. It's a collaboration, an asymmetrical collaboration, where the Union Army is not there to free slaves necessarily. They are there to win the war, put the Union back together. Some of them, and this is something historians are arguing about, did they ever switch over to anti-slavery as their purpose? My friend Gary Gallagher says no, that they ended the war in favor of Union as their main purpose. Other people say no, you look at it and there is clear evidence of the changing of the minds of the white soldiers. What we do know is that by the end of the war, 3.5 million enslaved people had still not come within reach of the United States Army. 500,000 had, and a remarkably large percentage of them had seized the moment to begin making themselves free. So we're trying here to integrate military history and social history in a way that we've not really succeeded in doing before. And what this shows, now it works both ways. There with Sherman, as many of you know, he complained about having 10,000 enslaved people after his army. And as you know, they drowned in swamps trying to keep up with this army. And he was callous toward them. But we know many other stories in which officers and enlisted men risked a great deal to be allies to the enslaved people. So what this means is, that's where the Lincoln movie comes in. There's still 3.5 million enslaved people beyond the reach of the United States Army, even at the end of the war. If Lincoln does not win, and if the 13th Amendment is not put into place, and the United States is put back together without slavery being destroyed, even then, what is going to be the future of slavery? So the lesson I'm trying to draw from all this, looking at multiple facets, is that the Emancipation Proclamation, a brave and crucial document. Without that, there's not nearly as many red dots. But I wouldn't want us to forget all the blue dots, all of the Union soldiers who are giving their lives to advance this cause. I would not want us to forget all the red dots of the enslaved people themselves who gave the sacrifice and bravery of the United States Army its deepest meaning. As we think about the Emancipation Proclamation, I think the Lincoln movie is great, but we can't stop with that. Not only does it not have Frederick Douglass in it, which would have fit perfectly within the constraints that it set for itself, but far beyond Washington, these are the dramas that are being played out along dark roads and in swamps, and they're the evidence of the heroism of hundreds of thousands of people who helped bring to an end the largest and most powerful system of slavery in the modern world. I think we need to expand our frame of reference as we think about what the Emancipation Proclamation was, as we think about what it accomplished, and as we think about what was still left to accomplish when Abraham Lincoln is assassinated. What would it take to bring all of this sacrifice and bravery to a culmination? I think it's fitting that your celebration here is also talking about 1963. because this is the beginning of the story. This is not the end of the story. This is the beginning of America really becoming itself and fulfilling what it had promised. And it's important that we don't brush it aside or take it for granted. Sometimes young people would say, well, Dr. Ayers, that's fine, but it was still slavery. And I said, no. Slavery is where they can sell your children. This is not the same. This is poverty. This is injustice. This is enduring. But the ending of slavery is something that is a turning point in American history. After that, nothing else would be the same. I think what this suggests, too, is that beginning with those 180,000 black soldiers and those 20,000 black sailors, that, as we heard in the introduction, African Americans have stepped forward to defend this country from the very first hour that they were permitted to today. As we think about things that are remarkable about this country, to think about what that means, that there would be that kind of forgiveness and that kind of loyalty and passion among the African American population that will let them come out of this moment and do what they do for this country today. So that's my overview of what the Emancipation Proclamation might look like if we put it in military and political and social context. You can't possibly have believed all that, so we've got 15 minutes. Let's hear what you might like to grill me about or elaborate upon. Who wants to go first? Yes, sir. Yes.
First of all, I enjoyed your presentation, Dr. Ayers.
Thank you very much. That's all we have time for today.
Well, let's see, I've got a comment and also a question.
Yes, sir.
The comment is that my great-grandfather, his name was Abraham Lincoln Carter.
Wow.
And the reason he was named that, for obvious reasons, is that he was born in 1863,
Wow.
May of 1863, 5 months after the Emancipation
Wow.
Proclamation. And
What
so,
a heritage.
I guess a lot of enslaved Africans were paying homage to Abraham Lincoln, and so
Right.
they decided to name their firstborn after
Right.
him. So that's the deal on that.
That tells you something, right?
Right. My question is, just how important was the Emancipation Proclamation? And the reason I ask that is that the South had seceded from the nation, so they were their own, as far as they were concerned, they were their own nation. So why should that have been of any value to them? Because, I mean, that's what was the purpose of succeeding.
Yeah.
So that they wouldn't have any
That's
laws
right.
of the North that they had to abide by.
And that's why Abraham Lincoln says, you're wrong. You're not a separate nation. Okay? That what you are is states in rebellion against the Constitution of the United States, and as such, I am, as Commander-in-Chief, removing slavery whenever, unless you come back in. I'm giving you 3 months. Okay? September to January. You're not doing it? Slavery is now abolished wherever the United States Army establishes dominion. Now, people start to say, well, the hypocrite, why he didn't do it in Kentucky and Maryland? Because doesn't have the opening of secession. They're still in the United States. And Lincoln respects the Constitution. So the Emancipation Proclamation is essential to everything else that follows. But by itself, it's not enough. Lincoln knew that signing that, this meant that the war would have to be driven to a conclusion of Union victory. It would have to actually be surrendered by the Confederacy to accept this. And since by committing that was going to be the end of it, he committed himself to a war to drive it to a conclusion. But people look at that and say, it didn't free any slaves where he could and freed slaves where he couldn't. But these blue dots show what Lincoln had in mind, that they would come and take that territory. The South had its chance, just like they paid for compensated emancipation in the District of Columbia. He offers Kentucky that. No, we'll just wait and lose all our money, right? So I think that's what you would have seen. And that's one reason you have to kind of see it in sequence and then in this context, because without that, you don't have the African-American soldiers. I'm not sure you have the blue dots going everywhere they go. You don't have that margin of victory. That make sense? All right. Yes, in the back.
Yeah, I'm originally from South Carolina.
Yes, sir.
And it's only been in the last, I think, 12, 13 years that the Confederate flag was taken from the State House Capitol. How do you look at, or how does America, from your perspective, look at the Emancipation and Civil War in today, in a modern context?
Yeah, you pointed to two different things. I'm going to tell you how America thinks about this rather than me. We want to have it both ways. We want to believe that the Confederacy was a constitutional, we not being everybody, people who want to keep that flag flying in South Carolina, want to say, yes, I'm proud of our heritage of fighting for our freedom as we determined it. And that the Constitution did not preclude secession, and we had that right. And yet, I'm not a racist. I'm glad that slavery's gone. And we've tried to have it both those ways ever since 1865. And a lot of times, the white North went right along with that. So, yeah, that's a good deal. You can be brave and honorable, and we won't really talk about what caused the Civil War, but it's good that slavery is gone. I think in recent decades, people have been less patient with that sort of trade-off in saying, as an army, the Confederacy was remarkable. Created out of virtually nothing, virtually overnight, and to fight against the largest and most powerful industrial democracy in our own nation state for 4 years, that is a remarkable accomplishment. As warcraft, the Confederacy was remarkable. And that does involve bravery and loyalty. What we're trying to figure out is, how do we decide what they were fighting for? And you run into lots of roadblocks. And as I hear lots of times, well, doctor, that might be true for other people, but my ancestors didn't own slaves. They could not have been fighting for slavery. And I said, well, it's not, first of all, as if you really had a choice. Virtually every able-bodied white man of military age fought for the Confederacy. It's not like, no, I just don't believe in it enough. You let me know how it works out. I'll stay home. Like that stupid movie Shenandoah, with Jimmy Cagney's got